Hello everyone, welcome back to Take for Study channel. In this video, we're going to discuss about class 9 science chapter 5 fundamental unit of life, which is under biology sector. So let us start this session. So in the earlier sessions, we have learned about cell definition and also cell discovery. In this session, we're gonna continue the topic cell discovery. Okay, let's go. So we've learned about what is cell, the three important terms or definitions which are used to describe a cell. What are they? Building block of life, structural and functional unit of life, and fundamental unit of life. And we've also learned in depth about their definitions, right? So now we're gonna learn about, and also we've learned about cell discovery, right? We've learned about 5 discoveries by 7 scientists. Okay, yeah, which are first one is Robert Hooke. He discovered Koch's lysis under microscope, and second is Anthony van Leeuwenhoek. He observed free living cells in pond water, bacteria, RBC, and sperm cell in microscope. And yeah, these are the images. And next one is Robert Brown. Third discovery, he observed nucleus in the year 1831. And next, fourth discoveries by Purkinje. In the year 1839, he coined the term protoplasm. And fifth discoveries by two biologists, Skeldon is a botanist in the year 1838, and Swan is a zoologist in the year 1839. These both discovered the cell theory. I gave 2 points of the cell theory, and the third point was given by Rudolf Virchow. So he extended the cell theory in the year 1855. So he's also known as the father of modern pathology, right? We've learned also that one. We have learned the 3 points of the cell theory. What are they? Cell is a basic unit of life. All living organisms are made up of cells. And the third one is all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. The Latin word for this is omnis cellulae acellula. And this point that all cells arise from pre-existing cells is not applicable for viruses. So they are an exception to cell theory. Why? Because they does not contain any cell membrane and cell organelles. They only contain nucleic acid, and that is why they are intermediate between living and non-living. So they cannot be either considered as living, and they cannot be either considered as non-living, right? Viruses. So now we're going to learn about postulates of cell theory. The first one is that all living organisms are composed of cells and cell products. Yes, we know that plants, animals, humans, whether all living organisms are composed of cells and all cell products. What are cell products? Cell products means the products which are produced by the cells, like cell organelles. They synthesize some proteins and lipids. As you can see here, these are the lipids. This is a lipid bilayer. Here image is there, that is lipid bilayer. So these cell organelles, they produce proteins. they synthesize proteins and lipids, and also the cells, they produce the hormones and enzymes. So these are called as cell products. Whatever products are produced by the cell are called cell products. So all living organisms are composed of cells and also cell products. Second postulate of cell theory is that all metabolic activities takes place in a cell. What are metabolic activities? Metabolic activities are the activities or reactions that take place in a body. So here in a cell, okay. So these all metabolic activities takes place in a cell. So whatever metabolic activities are there in our body take place in the cell, and from there our whole body. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs, and organs make organ system, and organ system in turn make us, right? So like that. Thus, a cell is a structural and functional unit of life. We have learned that this is the second important definition of to describe a cell. Yes. So, why is a cell structural and functional unit of life? Because all the metabolic activities takes place in a cell. So, enzymes are the essential catalyst. And the third postulate of a cell theory is that all the cells arise from the pre-existing cells only. No cell can originate spontaneously, but they come into being only when the old cells, they arise the new cells. Only they come into being when they are arised by the pre-existing cells, right? So all cells originate from whom now? From only the pre-existing cells. So original cell will undergo the cell division, and by dividing cell, and again it will divide into two daughter cells, and by that it will divide further, so that the new cells will be arised. So that is why the all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. And the fourth point or the postulate of a cell theory is that every organism starts its life as a single cell. So every organism, whether it may plant, animals, human, every living organism will start its life as a single cell. Then with the help of the capabilities, whatever capabilities is having, depending upon that, it will be becoming in the further, in the future, as a multicellular organism. Okay. So viruses are an exception to cell theory because they are intermediate between living and non-living. Why? Because they doesn't contain any cell organelles and cell membrane, right? They only contain nucleic acid. So they are neither living nor non-living. So they are intermediate between living and non-living. That is why they are an exception to cell theory. So we've learned about the postulates of the cell theory, 4 postulates. Now we're going to learn about what is a microscope, types of microscope, and difference between the 2 types of microscopes. Okay. What is a microscope? Microscope is an instrument or device which is used to observe tiny structures which we cannot see with naked eyes. Naked eyes means our normal eyes. So it is an instrument or device which is used to observe tiny structures. Tiny structures means cell. Like cell, tiny structures means like cell, like also atoms and molecules also are tiny structures only. And also in the 8th class science we have learned about the 2nd chapter, microorganisms. So microorganisms are also tiny structures which we cannot see with our naked eyes. So that can also be observed by the microscopes. So microscope is an instrument or device which is used to observe tiny structures which we humans cannot see with the naked eyes, means normal eyes, right? Types of microscopes. There are 2 types of microscopes. They are compound microscope and electron microscope. Compound microscope is also known as light microscope, and electron microscope, the picture will come like a photograph, means that much clear image in the electron microscope compared to compound microscope. Now we'll learn the differences between compound microscope and electron microscope. Okay. Compound microscope was developed by scientists Hans and Zacharias Janssen in 16th century, means in 1590. And electron microscope was developed by scientists Knoll and Ruska in year 1940. So here electron microscope is discovered after the discovery of compound microscope and the discovery and developed of the compound microscope after those particular years. Then electron microscope was discovered, means after some years later of the compound microscope, electron microscope was discovered and developed also. Right. So in the compound microscope we use glass lens to observe the object or specimen, but in the electron microscope we use electromagnets to observe the object or specimen. Here specimen means like a cell, like a plant cell, animal cell. Okay. Specimen, we usually call them specimen, okay, or the object also. So in the common microscope we use glass lens. In electron microscope we use electromagnets to observe object or specimen. And the compound microscope we use light to illuminate objects, so it is also known as light microscope. Why is compound microscope known as light microscope? Because compound microscope uses light to illuminate objects, so that is why it is known as light microscope. In electron microscope we doesn't use a light to illuminate objects, we use a beam of electron to illuminate objects. Okay, so here all in the electron microscope whatever we use, those are all developed. Okay, electromagnets and electron, these are all developed, and these all were discovered later in the later years of the compound microscope discovery. And also in the compound microscope it doesn't require any internal vacuum. Vacuum means the space where no matter exists. Matter means what? Matter is any substance in the nature that occupies space and has mass. So vacuum means it doesn't occupy space and it doesn't have any mass, means weight. Okay, so in the compound microscope it doesn't require any internal vacuum, but in the electron microscope internal vacuum is very essential and very necessary, because a beam of electron, we use a beam of electron to illuminate objects, right? So these beam of electron can move only in a vacuum. They doesn't have any other choice to move in other places. So they have only they have only the vacuum, internal vacuum to move. So that is why in the electron microscope internal vacuum is essential, but in the compound microscope internal vacuum is not essential. And also in the compound microscope magnification power is 300 to 1500 times bigger the size of object, but in the electron microscope the magnification power is 1 lakh to 5 lakh times bigger the size of object. Here in the microscope the small structures will be magnified, means the image will come larger, so that we can observe inside and outside parts also clearly, right? So that is why here the magnification they tell you. So magnification power of the compound microscope is 300 to 1500 times bigger the size of object, but in the electron microscope it is 1 lakh to 5 lakh times bigger the size of object. So here we can see that electron microscopes are so developed, and they're also very futuristic. But in the compound microscope it is somewhat, the images will come somewhat okay clearly, but in the electron microscope they will come very clearly without any blurs. So here we can see that electron microscope is very developed, but compound microscope is only used in all the schools and the colleges, because it costs less, and also it is very free to use than electron microscope. For electron microscope, we also need electromagnetic beam of electron, but in the compound microscope, just glass lens is required and light is required. That is why we use compound microscope in most of the schools and colleges. Okay, it's time to recap what we've learned in the session. We've learned about the 4 postulates of cell theory, and we've also learned what is a microscope and types of microscope and the differences between the 2 types of microscope. Okay, then thank you for watching this session. If you like it, please do like it, share it with your friends and family, and also comment your doubts and questions to me. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon. Thank you.